Good afternoon and welcome to a rather obviously titled segment. A segment specially designed to showcase the backstories of individuals who have made an impact. Luminary Learning Solutions crafted this segment so you, our audience, can truly be inspired. I'm Anton Thailand, the Chief Evangelist for Luminary Learning Solutions and the co-host this hour. Joining me is our founder and destiny architect, Vidusha Nathavitarana, the host. And together we will take you through an hour of free-flowing discussion. In today's segment of In Conversation With, it is my privilege to introduce Markus Roselieb. Markus is the founder of Chiang Mai Life Architects and Chiang Mai Life Construction, specializing in green and sustainable architecture, focusing on educational projects and high-end residential and commercial projects. Markus advocates architecture that warms people's hearts and makes them smile. His approach is based on the modern organic design using a combination of natural materials such as bamboo with the 21st century engineering knowledge and integration of structures in their physical and cultural environments. With the right knowledge of bamboo, it is a potent and versatile construction material as well as the interior design item that combines well with any modern material, which applies to clay as well. Markus is also the co-founder of Panyadan International School, promoting a new form of education that is value-based and gives children a framework of trusted, eternal values combined with an international curriculum of distinguished academic excellence focusing on creativity, closeness to nature, and environmental science. He is a medical doctor by training from the University of Vienna, Austria, and he is also an architect who learned architecture through passion, observation, and especially the microstructure of the human bone. On that note, Markus, welcome to the show.
Hi, Anton. Thank you so much, Vidusha and Anton, for inviting me to this talk. I'm very excited to be part of the Luminary Learning Sessions.
Thank you for accepting the invitation, Markus. And before we dive in, that last sentence, I am puzzled, and I know Vidusha has a string of questions on this. A medical doctor turned architect. Please tell us what happened.
Well, you see, Austria is very much like Thailand and probably India in many ways. When we choose a study when we're young, it is not always by passion or we know exactly what we want. It's more or less circumstantial in many ways. So it was with me. My grandfather was a doctor. My grandmother, whom I listened to a lot, suggested a doctor would be a good path. I was in the top 5% at school. So, it was just the right thing to do at that time. And I had no cons and no pros for anything else. So I studied and I liked it, but there wasn't, it wasn't that I had saving the world on my banner. But I learned a lot, very important things, and becoming a doctor helped me, of course, navigating the world in a different way and gave me opportunities I wouldn't have had otherwise. So it was a good starting point. But I guess growing up in Austria, where you have a lot of interesting architecture and culture, it's a very rich culturally rich country, and it just sieved into my subconsciousness. And growing up in the mountains to being close to nature and always wanting to be came out later on in life. So I've always been observing spaces and the impact the spaces have on the quality of life of people. Seeing people living in small little concrete boxes and how miserable they are and how values get distorted, and then seeing great architecture, whether in Italy or France or India or wherever, and see how people start to open up and smile. And these kind of things really stuck in me. And every time I moved or we moved, and I took a lot of effort in creating a space where the family was well, or friends when I helped there, and it just was the fun thing to do. And when the opportunity came up, I just took it, you know. It's kind of surfing as things come along. So there was no bigger plan in anything. Actually, to be very honest, I never had a big plan of anything. Things just happened, and then I'd always try to stay in the moment as much as I could, and then take the best of this moment and take the next step forward. So when things present themselves and they seem to be the right things to do, I just do them without having a plan B or a bigger scale of things in mind.
But why architecture? Because it's so different to the medical profession. How did you move into it? And did you practice, for starters, as a medical doctor?
Yes, indeed, I practiced. You know, the system in Austria is very similar to the system in Thailand here too. When you finish studying, you still have to practice at least 3 years for the government. And after that, I did some more time in surgery, especially in surgery for accidents and trauma surgery, as it's called. And then when I came to Thailand, I worked in a refugee camp for a while, and I worked with the flying doctors all over Asia, helping establish a clinic in Vietnam and also in Burma for a while. And after that, I got frustrated with the day-to-day life as a doctor. Once you've worked in a refugee camp, which is probably the most fulfilling kind of work you can do as a medical doctor, it's difficult to fit into a normal practice where people come with colds and headaches, and actually, if you give them real advice, which most of the time is drink warm water and have rest, they go to the next guy until they get a pack of pills, which they then don't eat anyway, but at least they want them. It's a kind of day-to-day routine. It was a bit frustrating. I went into research into university in Bangkok about monoclonal antibodies developing, which is now hot again, developing antigen test kits, but for tropical diseases at that time, and try to make a startup for these test kits, because these kind of tests were really missing, were important. But of course, I realized that this was it was a dream that never happened, because there's no money in these things for tropical diseases. The money is only in things where people of the developing countries get rich, developed countries get rich, not that people from tropical countries where only the UN or others sponsor such development. So never took off. One of the failures I learned from. And also family things, and we were in Bangkok for a long time, and then we moved up country, and I started rebuilding the house here. My wife, who as a typical Thai family is also my boss, said she wants a school. I said no, and now we have a school, so you can see how things go.
So you
fabulous. Vidusha can relate to this so well, Markus. That's just brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. We are with you. We are with you on that, and it's not a bad arrangement to have the boss of the house to be a female, and we are okay with that. I often tell that we are very good. We are very good that way. We domesticate well.
Yes. Yes.
But
I do as I'm told.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I surf along, and
Yeah, we are good. Yes, but architecture, it is a subject in its own right, and how did you kind of learn it, in the sense of, to be an architect, you do need to kind of do formal study, and it's a pretty rigorous course as well. Lots of math involved, lots of theories involved, lots of engineering involved, and it's a far cry from what you did before.
There's two things to say to that. One is, even when I was a doctor and I was practicing, as a general practitioner medicine, some of the best doctors I met actually didn't study medicine. You know, there were people who learned something very passionately, some maybe alternative medicine or something by heart, and helped a lot more people than those who sit in the office and prescribe paracetamol every day. So also there already I saw, you know, the medical side is very rigorous, but it's not necessarily the doctors that come out there who can really help patients most. You know, sometimes it's just a really good nurse, or so many people can help patients sometimes better than, you know, especially young doctors who come out. Having said that, you know, I've been building since I'm very young and doing things. You know, in Austria when I was young, you couldn't just call a electrician or plumber so easily. You had to do a lot of things yourself. My family was fatherless very early, and so my brother and me, we had to do a lot of things. I always enjoyed it, you know, building this and there and taking down and repairing. And when we were students, it was normal that so many, Vienna was full of old places, that we renovate those places and I started building a house and all of this, of course, by ourselves. So, you know, I learned very early about this kind of things and how to look at things, how to look at spaces and how to use them best. And, you know, understand what they call feng shui, which is just an art of looking at spaces and understanding them. And increasing the functionality as good as you can with experience. And I've been doing this, I think, since I'm probably 14, 15 or so. And everywhere I went, I built something. I came to Thailand. I built a house in the countryside. I renovated a house in Bangkok. I built a house on the seaside. And so, you know, I've been in this, to be very honest, since very early. And I think, you know, as we all, in Asia, it's easier to say this. In Europe, they look at this with skepticism, but there must have been something from my past lives because it was an easy entry. You know, in some things, if you want to enter and you want to learn, like, you know, I really want to learn accounting. It was difficult. I mean, accounting is one thing, but, you know, there's so many things that we want to do that are difficult, but this one came very easy. And it came also through the understanding of the microbone structure, because there are these little things inside a bone that are called trabeculae, and they adjust to the use according to how you use your leg. If you run more or less, or if you sit, actually your bone inside will adjust and shed whatever is not necessary. The human body is a very efficient structure in many ways, that if you don't use something, it will atrophy. It means it will get smaller and smaller. If you use something, it will grow. Muscles, bones, and the bones adjust. People think a bone is a fixed thing, but it is not at all. Inside, the trabeculae adjust to according the forces that impact the bone and that they have to absorb. So I was always fascinated by this idea, and interestingly, they are very often arranged in the form of arches or Gothic or Rome or you know, the old arches in architecture, and these things just click together. So when we build something nowadays, especially with bamboo, I have a very intuitive and quick understanding of how loads have to be absorbed and have to be dealt with, and that is necessary if you build, because if you build with bamboo, you build as a structural architect. It means you show your structures that are actually the load bearing, that are the core of your building. That is the interesting part about the whole bamboo business, that when you see a building, you see what it is. There's nothing hidden inside, right? The bamboo itself is beautiful, but it's also one of the most potent, one of the strongest building materials out there. So I think the understanding from anatomy and from the microstructure of bones, and also, you know, from looking at things all the time, helped me to ease into this quite easily. And, you know, I love it. It's a passion. So, you know, once something is a passion, you pick up things everywhere. You look in a bookshop and you see exactly the answer to what you're looking for. Instead of seeing 100,000 books, you see one, right? Or if I look at an old building, I see one part where I say, wow, this is really genius. and it's kind of non-obvious to everyone else, but I look at it and say, this is the answer to something I've been thinking about, you know. So I think once you're passionate about things, then you look at the world in a different way and you absorb fast and easier. That's what happened to me.
That's a pretty interesting, very, very interesting analogy between living organisms and architecture, because 9 times out of 10 you look at architecture from a very rigid perspective, isn't it? When you think of a structure, you don't look at it from a living organism perspective, you look at it from a mechanical perspective of brick and mortar and the building materials. But I know architecture isn't that. There is an aesthetic around it and there is a functionality around it, for sure. But to draw inspiration from the human anatomy and look at bone structures and then weave that into architecture, now that's something novel. A question on that is, you talk of spaces versus buildings, and I know exactly what you're referring to, but take me through your thought process. Why don't you use the word buildings? Why do you call it spaces?
The buildings is the wrapping, is the secondary thing. The space comes first, or the space is the essence of what you want to create, and then the building has to create the space you have in mind. So we are not there to create buildings. Really, we are there to create a space, and the space is a combination of the function that you want to achieve, of the person that you build it for, and the background and what that person likes and dreams about, and the place where it is, the actual physical place, where, you know, a slope on a hill or a valley, or next to a factory, or out in the open, or, you know, every place where you walk in, you get a different feeling. And you have to understand how that feeling mingles with the objective of the building that you want to create, and how you can use it best. So when that person that is your client walks into this building, it experiences exactly or more than what it had in mind to experience. So every day when you come to this building, you're inspired, you're invigorated, and you want to go there. You don't want to go anywhere else. You see, one of the things that I saw here that made me very desperate is they have this gated communities in Thailand. You know, this housing developments by private developers with a fence around an entrance, and every house inside is more or less the same. Maybe you have 2 or 3 types to choose from, but they look all the same. They were all created on a computer somewhere and sold from a little model somewhere before the house was built. And if you go there on a Saturday morning, and if you watch people in Thailand, at least 80% of the people will jump in their car and drive somewhere, a shopping mall, out into nature, but it will be empty. You see, for me, that's an architectural failure. If I build a home for someone, then I want these people to feel this is the best place to be. I will invite my friends over, and I will spend my time with my family here. I don't need to go into my car and go anywhere. I mean, once in a while, of course, we all have to go out, but this is our place. This is the best place in the world. And if you can't achieve that, if people don't come home and feel, I like to be here, I don't need to go out tomorrow, I think then you failed as an architect. So this is the space. It is a home space. That's why I say the space, and how you make it. Well, that everybody has a different taste. That's up to you. But in the end, the building is just the wrapping for the space.
Was it difficult to kind of? I know you said it was a passion and therefore it became seamless, but there are other things that weigh in when you make decisions of this nature, and it's not just about you and what you would like to do. So especially when you're a doctor, and I know this for a fact, certainly in our part of the world, and you'll relate to this because you've been in the subcontinent and in Asia quite a lot. Being a doctor is a pretty prestigious thing. An architect, not so much. It's not to say that architecture as a profession is a bad thing or anything of that nature. I'm just saying, I'm just calling it out for what it is, right? In our part of the world, if you're a doctor, you're at the absolute apex of the professions that you can ever be. So it's every mother's dream, every father's dream to have their kids to be able to be a doctor, right? Was it difficult to kind of move away from, I mean, if you're doing architecture as a hobby, that's a different conversation. But this is your life now. This is your profession now. This is what you do. This is who you are. Was it difficult from a social kind of perspective to move from being a doctor and being an architect?
I guess I don't want to sound arrogant or weird, but I never had that feeling that, that being a doctor was an socially important thing to be, or to be socially, maybe I'm not a very social person, or maybe I don't have, according to my wife, my social abilities are rather negligent, so negligible. So I think if she's right, that might explain why I wasn't, that never hooked me or captured me, that the doctor title would give me, more privileges or an easier path of life, or a better reputation. It was just not something that really played very highly in my mind. So I know it is, and it helped me a lot. I have to admit that, walking into a space and being a doctor just helps you. But I never put it out front, and I didn't have to. I think once you focus on what you like to do, this just becomes secondary. And I must say that once you have something that fulfills you and that you're proud of, that you do, instead of something that is just, came your way, it just makes you a different person, and gives you also with people a different partner to talk with. And so I can't really say it was difficult for me, because you see, as a doctor, the part that interested me in medicine, to be very honest, was trauma surgery. I liked surgery. I'm a guy who likes to use his hands, and and as I said, my social skills are maybe not so good. So if people sleep, it's much easier for me than if they sit in front of me and talk all the time. So using my hand was good. But in order to become a really good trauma surgeon, you have to be single. The best trauma surgeons, they have no family life, or if they have one, it's rather poor. And family was always a strong factor for me. I just, I can't stay away from my children. I just love the family too much, and so it was a choice I had to make. And I made it consciously, that by leaving trauma surgery, I left the big career in medicine. That was it. So working in a refugee camp was another thing. And we might talk about this another time, but why I left that is more for the political background that you have to go through, because in the end it becomes politics, and I didn't like that part. I really went there as a doctor and not to play politics. And then, so this left science for me. So I did the science for a while, which was interesting. It was very, very interesting, but I'm a practical guy. I want to see an effect in the world. So we developed those test kits, and we couldn't get them going, and we sank a lot of money into it, and so the time came to say goodbye to that too. So there was step by step a conscious decision to move out of this area, and as I had the opportunity to build, which I really liked to, I didn't hesitate twice.
What in the sense where, when you create spaces, where do you draw inspiration from? Because I do know that different architects and look at different aesthetics for inspiration. For example, whenever we go down to Galle, which is a quiet little town, and you would know this because you've been in Sri Lanka, it has a completely different feel, isn't it? I know historically it was a fort. It's no longer a fort. Yes, of course, it is a walled city.
Yes.
But it's a very different feel, and there's a lot of inspiration to draw from history and historical buildings. But at the same time, you look at natural environments and draw inspiration from that. How do you find inspiration, and how do you kind of peg one against another when you create something?
That's a very good question. Um, the first thing for me is to see the place. Once you look, as you said, every town has a different vibe, has a different feeling, and that if you go there and you have to stay at the place for a while, you have to go to see it in the morning, in the evening, during the day, on different times, walking around, understanding. Some of the trees are useful, some of the trees are actually not useful. They grow on the wrong spot. And some of this is fine, and here it's too low. It's a thing that kind of starts slowly. You have to get the feel, then you have the function, then you look at the person, you look at the people, and I don't force this part. I take a while. And the other thing that our philosophy is organic architecture, means we use forms and lines from nature. So very often we look at something that is there, whether it's a fruit with an interesting shape, or a river line, or the mountain crest, or whatever is there that kind of is a clear, distinctive line and can play into the place and make the place fit in at the same time strong. And then we start sketching something, also modeling something, and one or the other. And also this process is done as a team. I have one junior partner, a Thai architect who's very, very gifted. And we bounce things back and forth, first with words, then with lines and drawings, and sometimes then there's a second idea come up, and then maybe it's sometimes merged with the first one. So it grows like a plant, or it grows like a fruit, where in the beginning you can't force it, in the beginning especially. Later on, when it gets to more details, then it becomes clearer what is possible and what is not. And then the material comes into play. We use bamboo, and bamboo as a natural material is very flexible, so we can bend it to a certain amount. And the bigger ones you can bend less, the smaller ones you can bend more. So then if you need a smaller curve, you need the smaller ones, you have more lines. So things come automatically also by the material that we use. Or they want a round earth wall with all the little stones inside and the colors, or a rounder wall, then you use adobe bricks. And then you start thinking of the material, what could work where, and why would you use it, and how will it enhance this curve or this kind of feeling. So the materials play a role in that too, and our understanding of then the sustainability comes into place. The sustainability is more or less an automatic suggestions. Once you're with natural materials and you have this kind of mindset, then we try to use what is there as much as we can before we introduce other things. How the water flows down, how to make the water reservoir at the right place, and without having to really redig the whole place, or just using it as smart as possible. But we are also not the absolute green guys, because in the end we need to create a space. And I do think that the human mind can enhance spaces. So the people say, oh, the nature already has the best space. I not necessarily agree to that. I mean, if you go into a natural park, yes, I wouldn't touch those. But if we come to an area where the human being wants to live and prosper and take care of this planet, then we have to enhance it, and we can, but we have to do it in a smart way.
Markus, I know you mentioned that it's organic and sustainable, right? And then how do you, or how are you different, if I may ask, from the other architects or organizations or companies that use natural, sustainable products, green products for architecture? What sets you apart? What is that unique piece?
I think it's our approach that we put combining at the center of what we do. We want to really combine natural materials with modern engineering knowledge. So we are not trying to be the the eco and green guys for eco and green sake. The reason why I went into bamboo and earth architecture in the very beginning was actually not because I thought, oh, it's great for the planet. I was fascinated by their functionality. I was fascinated that bamboo actually has a higher tensile strength than steel. It has a compressive strength higher than oak and as high as steel, but it's lightweight. It's a tube. So it's in order to break it, you need enormous amounts of forces. So it's a very, very strong material that grows by itself. And if you understand how to use it, it can last very long. The main problem with the bamboo is its image. It is poor man's material, because if you select it wrong, there's a little bugs that go and eat the starch inside, and then the powder comes down if you build with bamboo. And most people live in tropical countries, they really don't like it because they've experienced the bamboo all over their clothes and the yucky feeling and the beetles in the house and the bugs. But actually, bamboo is like asparagus. In its early years, it is very soft. It's full of starch, very little fibers, and that's why the panda bear, the elephant, and the human beings eat it. So, but at the same time, it grows like a grass. That means the new ones grow on the outside. So it's easier to cut the new ones that are full of starch with very little fibers. If you wait for about 3-4 years, the starch content goes down, the fiber content goes up, and after about 4 years, bamboo becomes actual construction material, where you have a dense fibrous structure with very little starch. But if you use the early one, you build a house with sugarcane, and then you wonder why everybody comes and eats it up, your house, and why it falls down on you. But that's not the materials problem, it's the ignorance of the user. That at that stage, that material was food, and then you shouldn't really use it. But human nature is inherently lazy. It's so much easier to cut the outside than to make a path and cut the inside ones, that it's very difficult to counter that development and also that image of the bamboo. Coming back to actually your question is that, so we looked at the bamboo really in its microstructure and so many things, that it is a very capable construction material, functional. And the same with the earth. Earthen walls insulate well. Inside it stays cool. They regulate humidity better. They create a nicer room climate and room feeling inside. You don't have to hang 1,000 pictures. If you have a nice earthen wall, that's all you need, And it keeps the temperature. It keeps it cool in summer, warm in winter. And if you know how to build again, we have earthen houses all over the world that are 800, 1,000 years old or even older. So if the house falls down, it's not because of the material. Again, it's the ignorance of the builder. If you know how to build, it will last. And most concrete houses are built today, they don't outlast 20 years until they are taken down. Even though everybody says it's so much better and stronger. Concrete is good. We use it for foundation. So we are not on the eco-freak side. We just try to use things as smart as possible. And that bamboo has a negative carbon footprint because it actually absorbs carbon during its production instead of releasing it like steel is the icing on the cake. I love it. Of course I love it. But it's not why I started it. So in all we do here, coming back to your question with differentiators, is that we understand it's natural and it's beautiful and all this, but our emphasis is on functionality. With the way we design, with the look at the materials, is we use the bamboo with its strength. And one of those things that includes, again, arches. One of the things we introduced into bamboo architecture that was really our innovation is bundling bamboo and making big arches. Why? Because usually a bamboo pole after about 9 meters gets too thin to be structurally competent. And then you have to make a joint. And the weakness is that joint, not the long pole. The long pole is strong, but the joint, because if you press on 9 meters at the other end, the force on this small part is very, very high. So we try to get around this and make these arches, and with those arches we can build any size without having that problem. So we try to design for this functional strength, not for the weakest part. And so we take this scientific approach to the materials, to every little detail. And I think and also I like to combine it with modern things, you know, putting in machinery or cameras, Wi-Fi. I like to bring this material into the daily life of the mass, not of the hippie column on outside of town. I want this to make it a material that everybody can participate in and slowly reduce our reliance on concrete and steel, because they're really overused. And not bad, but they're just overused, and the damage they do is too big.
On that note, I do want to ask, how difficult is it to get that ethos across? Because most of the time, and you touched it when you mentioned this in your final sentences, most of this type of architecture is for a very niche market. It's not for the masses. Of course, we've used this kind of building in our normative years of our history. But it's something that we want to get out of because we think it's poor man's building material. If you can't afford anything else, well, use earthen walls. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the super rich who wants to do something unique. And therefore, you kind of go with the newest craze. How difficult is it to make this mainstream where the functionality of it with the modernity of it comes into living spaces for everyday people versus the super rich or the super poor?
Yeah, you just have to, I think this is what you guys teach your clients to. You have to be very clear on your mission and you cannot veer off it. So what we do is we position ourselves in the higher part of the normal market, not super high end, like I think Anton mentioned to me before, like in Bali you have, you know, a group of people who are related to millionaires and billionaires and build a house for many $1 million and beautiful, you know, absolutely stunning, but unaffordable to the masses. So what we are trying to do is different. We really want to position ourselves in the upper end of the normal market. And the reason why we need to be in the upper end is for 2-3 things. First of all, I personally just can't do cheap things. You know, I just don't have it in me. I need to do something really nice. It has to last, it has to be beautiful, it has to make people smile, and it has to be functional. And then, you know, we're talking about effort that can't be cheap to start with. The second thing is I have a social mission in terms of, I know I use a lot of hill tribes in Thailand as my workers, mainly actually, and they, you know, there's Burmese hill tribes. The Burmese military burned down the villages, chased them to Thailand. Thai's not too happy, so they work with me. And I prefer to do everything by hand, give the work to them instead of buying a machine and give that money to the producer of the machine. So everything is handmade, which, you know, again, makes it a bit more costly, but more beautiful and also more higher quality. And then it is also to change the image. You have to produce something nice. And we find that the only way to change the image is to have people buy, to have money, and who enjoy to have money. And we build something that magazines come and put on the front cover or put in magazines. It goes in TVs. It goes, you know, it's become showcases. And that's one of the things why we have clients, because they've seen, oh, your things have been in magazines all the time. And I can say, okay, if I build this for you, the likelihood that you will be in the magazine is very high. Okay, they like this. And once that happens, that's the only way to change the people on the lower end of the financial system mind. Because, you know, many NGOs came to us and said, oh, let's build something for the farmers and for the poor people and so on. And I did it once. And after a year, we built a small community house in the mountains for a hill tribe. After a year, went there and it looked completely run down. So I went to the headmaster of the village, whom I remember, and he remembered me. So I asked him what happened. He said, you really thought we're going to use this? Now we're using this. And this was concrete and tin roof, right? Because that's the material they want. That's the material of the rich people. They want those materials of the rich people. They don't want to have an earthen and bamboo house. For them, it's poor people's material. So I don't believe in this. Let's build bamboo and earth houses for the poor. They don't want this. You know, give them what they want. You can actually build cheaper with concrete and tin than you can do with earth, or at the same cost, you know. So I think in order to change their minds, if they see, oh, the rich guys use it, they will appreciate it again. I mean, there's always exception. I'm generalizing now. You know, there's always also smart villages. There's also all this, but you know, the mainstream is like what I just said.
No, absolutely. And in that journey, I do want to kind of come into something very personal. Yours is a very, very unique mix, isn't it? There's science and there's the arts that combine seamlessly to produce what you produce. I love what you said, to say that you're not doing it because it looks nice or because you think it's just green, but it needs to be functional as well. Does that relate to you as a person as well, where you need it to be functional, but you also need it to be aesthetic? How does that translate into you being a husband and a father?
That's a very cute question. I mean, luckily the boss is not around, so I might be able to say what is in my mind. You know,
you do realize this is being recorded.
So choose your next words wisely, for they may be your last.
Well, you know, I think I'm a very dedicated family man, and I do think that I think that you know, functionality is a good question. It's the same passion that I have for my work. I do have for my family, you know, my children, and to inspire them, to give them the spark, is something that takes a big part of my thinking. How to do that actually is not easy, because we tend to pamper them all too much, you know. So how to so back to your functionality, I do have a lot of theoretical thinking that I try to put into practice, that is based on research, science, experience, listening, and I'm not so sure it is as successful as my architecture. I'm just very lucky that the children have a strong nature and survive our efforts to mold them into something that they maybe shouldn't be molded to anyway. But you know, a lot of time goes into it's so funny if you tell them, you know, you don't have to study, because if you want to be good, famous, or if you want to make money, everything starts with the same thing. You have to like what you do, because only if you like what you do, you spend the effort and time that is necessary to accumulate those 10,000 hours that make you master of what you do, and therefore make you different and better than others. But because you do what you do, you will do it without feeling it's work. And the children listen to us like, you know, like we're fools, you know. No, but I have to study it, and I insist with the kids, you know, I've studied medicine, I have studied economics, I have studied, you know, my postgraduate in medicine, languages. I've been in this academics too much, and I can see it's good, but you know, experience and working is better and more fun. Also, it makes money and they leave the house earlier. but that's really secondary. Anyway, so yeah, you know, no comment about myself as a husband. I'm probably pretty lousy.
I don't think so, but anyway.
Words of wisdom coming out there, Markus. Great answer indeed. I do have a question based on the fact that, you know, your whole philosophy about how to build this, and you rightly said, you didn't go about doing this, you know, to save the planet and to be green, etc. But you looked at the texture, you looked at how it benefits and what you can do with this great material, right? And I was listening in for a bit, and your work is recognized globally, right? The question I have for you is, have you ever had to say no to a client or to a project? Have you turned somebody down and said, sorry, I can't take this up, based on your philosophy and principles?
Yes, that happens. Yes. I mean, you see, sometimes you can just, I've seen so many things. So many people come with projects, and maybe 1 out of 100 becomes reality. Where people come really every day, and some of them just disappear by themselves. Some of them you want to engage into a friendly conversation and steer it off to red wine or something that is more interesting, and try to get off the topic of building, because you don't want to upset them, but you also don't. Yeah, of course it happens. I think it is very important. I had this friend, Dr. Phil. He's a chiropractic. He never studied medicine, but he's one of the best doctors I ever met. And what makes him different is his diagnosis. He will look at you and look at your strength of left and right and feet. And then after spending quite some time, 20 minutes at least, 30 minutes to look at you, he will tell you, I can't help you, or I'm sorry, I can't help you. Go to somebody else. And because he does that, his success rate is almost 100%. Because he only helps people that he can help. So his reputation went over the top quickly because he learned how to say no to people he can't help, and he sent them off somewhere else. And I think this is the same here. If I see that the clients want something different than where my positioning is, I'm very clear. I say, I don't do this. They want a cheap bamboo hut resort on Koh Samui. I'm not interested. Because that will destroy not only my reputation, or is not in line with my philosophy of work, but it will also destroy the reputation of bamboo even more, because these houses will come down after 2 years and people will say, you see, bamboo doesn't last. That's stuff I don't want to be associated with. So very clear, yes, we have to say no on a very regular basis.
On that, just to kind of move away from architecture per se, and just more life in general. When you do this kind of work, especially when you started out, it's not always that everything goes according to plan. Buildings are notorious for taking longer, being more expensive than budgeted. Clients coming and saying, can we have a window here when there was none? Or can we take out the door that was actually there? Building houses becomes a very painful experience for all concerned, isn't it? Which is in our part of the world, when we start building a house, they generally associate that with the worst periods of our life. That we have horoscopes and such, and they generally look at the horoscope before you build a house, because that's generally when the planets are completely out of whack with you, and everyone suffers, right? So when these kind of things takes place, there is growing frustration all around. Some projects stop halfway through. And those transitions and moving within those transitions and insisting that it works until it is done and seeing it through becomes very, very important, especially when you're starting out in your practice, because if you're associated with half-built houses, well, you're not going to have much of a reputation. How do you see things through in all its complexities? How do you find that little inner strength to kind of say, you know what, let's just stay on the path? Where's that Zen coming from?
Well, listening to you, you must have built quite a lot of houses with the experience that you were just talking. Very, very true. Oh, so true. I mean, because I have done that myself before, and it has always been a bit of a strain on my relationship with my lovely wife, and I will not want to have that again. I have set out some principles to start with. First of all, I have never been over time or over budget with any project ever, because from the beginning, I will add enough to be sure I can stay inside. Even during COVID times, I have not gone over time once. And that is good. I just say it long, and they say so long. I said, yeah, it will be so long. And if I finish at 60% of the time, everybody's happy. Nobody will be angry with me. So never, so I never compete on price ever. people come to me because they like what I do, and I tell them this is what it will cost, and I know what it will cost, you know, and I've done my things now often enough, and then I add a contingency, of course. And if I add too much contingency, I add something for the client in the end that he didn't expect, you know, then to balance things out, something to give something a little bit more. If something didn't happen that I thought 50% might happen, so I added it in. But never go over time or budget is one of the rules I really try to adhere to as best as I can. And then nobody's perfect, and it will happen at one point, but so far so good. How to handle a client during the process. I also make clear from the very beginning that what we do is very, very different, because we are not just construction, it's also art, it's sculpturing. So even when I give a plan to a client, I tell them that when I am on site and I see that that curve of the roof is not the best for this place, I will change it. If I see this has to be moved there a little bit, I will move it. Not because I'm careless, but because I found a better solution than we thought first. Because the first thought is in computer and paper, but this is real. This is where you walk in. I can align your walking path better with your ground once we're there than when it's on the paper. So I am aware that, and I make the client aware that not only he can change things, we will change things. And if the client changes things and he has a really good idea that makes it better, I go along. But if I see that this is just an idea that was given to my friend, or he saw somewhere that in the end will not make it better, you know, I do my best to insist. It is my duty as his architect to make the best for him in the long term. So, you know, you have to be diplomatic at times and strong at times, and disappear at times, you know, as a mix of options that we have to, and never stop working. That's the other thing. I never stop. I also look at the client and I tell him from the beginning, this has to finish. I cannot do unfinished projects. I haven't left. Even I had 2 clients who didn't pay. In the end, I still finished the project. I still finished it, because if you have an unfinished project, nobody wins. And if they don't pay, then I go to court. But I can go to court and say, this is finished. Here are the photos. Everybody says this is finished. If you stop halfway through, you lose anyway. There's nothing you can win. So I haven't done any unfinished project yet, not a single one, but sometimes on my own cost. But not without getting back to the client with the courts. I don't want to put it out there that I finish projects on my own cost, but I will not let things unfinished. I do my best to start with making sure I choose the right client. I choose where I can see this will be finished, and then we finish it. Very, very wise observation that you had, because not many people understand that part, that you have to make sure you can finish. You're one of the very few understood that.
Yeah, thank you. Now, I have one last question, because I'm mindful of time. I'm looking at the clock. Anton just dropped me a text. That's when I kind of start looking at the clock, because otherwise I just completely lose track of time. But just to kind of wind this up with all of this, and I love the fact that you mentioned that family is important, and that you spend probably the same level of passion and the same level of commitment and the same level of time about home as it is with your profession. I'm very curious to find out, what is it that you do in your profession that has helped you become better at home? Because I think all of us spend a whole lot of time on what we do outside of our homes, but we don't generally translate some of those into something that we can bring home, and vice versa. Some things that we do at home makes us better at what we do at work as well. So any thoughts on how being a wonderful architect probably would have helped at home?
I think what I understood as architect, and not necessarily understood enough before, is how important it is to inspire people, to inspire the world. I can see that we get so many positive feedbacks with the work we do of people who don't intend to use us. They just say, this is so inspiring. And I can see with the kids, that if I prepare something, if we do something, and it is inspiring, that I've done a lot more than, you know, teach them, I don't know, whatever is necessary, other people think is necessary to do. So I think the feedback, and I didn't even think about it, you know, my work in that from the beginning, that I'm going to go out and inspire people. I just did the things that I wanted to do, and I saw it as inspiring, and I love that part. I am very happy to hear when people get inspired, and so I think I learned that, and I'm trying to bring that home more, to be an inspiring father also, not just the father.
Thank you for that. Anton, over to you, sir.
Anton, I think you have your microphone off.
Apologies for that. Markus, we are ever so grateful for the time. We do understand that you have a busy schedule. So thank you for giving us your time, and thank you for sharing those valuable stories and insight. For those who've joined in, Markus Roselieb is the founder of Chiang Mai Life Architects and Chiang Mai Life Constructions, specializing in green and sustainable architecture. He's also the co-founder of Panyadan International School, a medical doctor by training and an architect by passion. He truly is a modern day icon. To our audience, thank you for staying tuned in. I hope you enjoyed this segment. We do have another interesting personality lined up for this segment next week, so do watch our social media spaces for the links to join in. If you've missed part of this conversation, it will be up on our LinkedIn channel, linked in our channel on YouTube. Subscribe, hit the notification button to stay updated, and remember to share. Shout out to our technology partners H1 for going strong with us in our third season. With this, I bid everyone a wonderful rest of the day. Stay safe, stay productive.